You're listening to the Visionary Lifestyle Podcast, the show that's dedicated to raising consciousness and empowering you to activate your highest potential. I'm your host, Magda Freedom Rod. Namaste Rainbow Warriors. I'm coming to you today from Bali, Indonesia. I've discovered that landing in Bali direct from India is a great travel strategy. Everything feels more clean and comfy here. In India, I was kind of roughing it. And of course, I'm madly in love with India, and I believe it's an important journey for everyone to spend time there. It certainly is for me. And I haven't even scratched the surface there. But Bali is an entirely different vibe. And there's better Wi-Fi here, so yay! The culture here is still Hindu, but a different kind than you see in India. The culture here is steeped in ceremony for everything in the whole world. They literally have a ceremony for everything, and it's amazing to be in a place that holds so much reverence for everything under the sun. Yesterday was a ceremony for all things metal, like cars and machines, and I hear there's one for trees coming up soon. How cool is that? I love the high energy of the sacred community here. In the couple days I've been here, I've been running into old and dear friends that I didn't expect to see, and that always feels magical. The air is hot and moist, everything is bright green, the prana is just palpable here. So much life force. Tomorrow, the Bali Spirit Festival will begin, and I'll be on a week-long Love Fest yoga train. I'm looking forward to recording a new season of interviews for you here with the international speakers and teachers from the festival, and keep this podcast rolling as a source of inspiration and empowerment for you. So now let's get to today's episode. Our guest today is Jonny Rose. Jonny is a 700-hour certified Yoga Alliance teacher. Now that's a lot of training, guys. He's part of the core teaching team at the Sanctuary, Thailand, where he's been teaching since 2014. After discovering yoga in Byron Bay in 2002, yoga has been happily taking over Jonny's life. He tries to do justice to all his amazing teachers in every class he leads for the amazing effects they had on his life. He believes that dancing is a basic human need, and he has a light-hearted approach and a wicked sense of humor, as you'll hear. I met Jonny on Koh Phangan, Thailand, on the advice of a common friend who said he'd make a great interview, and that he did. Jonny lives most of his life in an absolute paradise on a small bay of turquoise water on this island in southern Thailand, surrounded by jungle and yoga. I enjoyed a couple of his classes there, and love his don't take yourself too seriously approach. In this interview, we took a deep dive into the 8 limbs of yoga, and especially the yamas and the niyamas. Jonny's explanation of these foundational yogic principles was straight to the point and enlightening. Jonny really breaks down the 8 limbs of yoga in a way that you may not have heard before. I hope you learned something here and get inspired to deepen your practice of true yoga. As usual, check out the show notes for links to Jonny and things we talk about in the show on my website at visionary-lifestyle.com/podcast. You'll find my social media links there too, so you can keep in touch and follow my behind-the-scenes stories that lead to these shows. See you next week. Enjoy, and namaste. Jonny Rose, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's awesome to be sitting here with you in the dark. Where are we?
We are on my deck, on my shrine deck, in my little tree house in the what we call jungle, but it's technically still a forest.
In Thailand?
In Thailand, on the island of Koh Phangan, on a little beach called Ha Tien East. Yeah,
pretty special place.
Yes, an interesting little magic pocket of the universe, I like to describe it as.
Precisely. That's exactly what it is here. It's a really special place. Yeah, so thanks for taking the time to sit with me and have some yoga talk. I know you've been teaching yoga here off and on for a handful of years, right?
Yeah.
At the Sanctuary,
which
is essentially like a detox yoga mecca center. How would you describe Sanctuary?
Well, sometimes I think of it like an enormous unwinding institution for people from the matrix to come and discover how they really feel about things and themselves. And people often remark, "Oh my God, everyone's so beautiful." And the way I find myself describing what's going on here, because I've been here for many, many months, like 45 of the last 51 months, which compared to a few of the real long-termers isn't that much, but for the transient nature of a tourist place, it is quite a lot. And what I say is, everyone is beautiful, and here there's less distractions of how you really are, because it's hard to get to. It's like trains, ferries, planes, and then boats to get here. So once people are here, they're here because they're here and they've heard it's a place to be, rather than a place to quickly be transient and move away from. There's no road access, only by boat or four-wheel drive vehicle. So people tend to pay attention to what's going on, and that gives them time to pay attention to themselves. And when they're in their process, whether negative or positive, that seems to be what makes people beautiful, because there's a little bit of an authenticity. They say that it's all a big quartz rock here, and that kind of amplifies people's energies. And people unwind.
Yeah, people are really present.
Very much so.
Yeah, it is such a beautiful, peaceful place here. I'm grateful to be here. We've been connecting about yoga, and I'd love to know, first of all, what brought you to yoga? How did yoga come into your life?
Wow. I was traveling for the first time by myself when I was 26 in Byron Bay, Australia, and I was staying at a hostel called the Arts Factory there. It's in 2002, and or 2003. No, 2002. And I had never even really heard much about yoga, and they were offering a class of it in the campsite where I was staying in the hostel, and I did the class. It was this surfer guy who was maybe in his late 40s, whose name was the Baron, and I did his class, and afterwards my very memorable thought was, the voices, they've stopped. And I had never felt so relaxed, I had never felt so calm, and ever since then yoga has been happily and slowly taking over my life in a more profound way.
Wow, so it was like an instant love at first
Absolutely.
breath with yoga.
And since I've been a teacher, I've really refined what it was. One of the specific things that he brought us to that has really helped, and I love to help people come to this same place, and it was the accentuation and the attention on the retention of breath after the breath, after the exhale. I'd never ever looked at that part of the breath before, and I realize now that that's one of the most calming places to direct our magical attention to.
Wow, beautiful. So do you mean holding the breath out after the exhale?
Yeah.
So staying empty.
Yeah. The void.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that, as focusing on that as a
I'm
detail.
so grateful for him for really, it was one of the first parts of the class accentuating that part of the breath.
I love that. That's powerful. So your teaching style, how would you describe your teaching style now?
Now I would say I'm very firmly inspired and loyal to the lineage of Krishnamacharya. And then bringing in anything that I feel I can use from all of the great teachers that I've had, and all of the the new physics things that we all like to bring into the paradigm as well. I'd say, and it depends on who I'm teaching and what time I'm teaching and what else is going on astrologically, or even the day of the week. One of my really important teachers, Randall O'Leary of Jungle Yoga, was so inspiring in the way he brings in so many of these cosmological forces into the way he trained us and the way he teaches, and that has really rubbed off. And then another very important teacher, Peter Clifford of Anahata Yoga, brought in such magic mental affirmation process and magic to the practice, that each breath can become a miracle.
Yes, Yeah, and I appreciated the way you taught the other day. You have a sense of humor. There's a lightheartedness.
Oh yeah.
To your style.
Well, because my body type isn't the normal yoga body type. I'm a big man, and I think because of that, I'm not trying to be the stereotype. And the stereotype, you know, yoga can be profound, and it is profound, and we do have the serious, profound moments, but I do feel like it's important to lighten up and smile as well, because smiling creates easiness.
Right. Yeah. Don't take yourself too seriously, yogis.
Yeah, because we've all met those yogis in the yoga world who take ourselves so seriously sometimes, because we're so yogi, we're so beautiful.
Yeah, we keeping the sense of humor in it and keeping it light, you know, at the appropriate moments, I think is great.
And the British are quite good at that in the festival world, you know, which has been a big part of my life too. You go to British festivals, everyone is just laughing and having fun and being stupid and silly. And this is what I feel the British bring to the festival world, this tickle, this silliness that the British bring.
Taking the piss, yeah?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Yeah, and just not taking oneself too seriously. And I feel like that's a really happy aspect of my practice and the way I try to transmit.
Yeah, I appreciate that you bring that positive high vibration to your classes. We're being visited by a kitten. Hi, sweetheart. Sure, you can come sit on my lap.
This is Mystic.
Nice. Hello, Mystic.
Mystic was a jungle kitten abandoned by her mother that's been blessing me with her cuddles for about 2.5 years now.
She's so sweet.
Yeah.
Wow. So I would love to hear from you about your interpretation and your teaching about the 8 limbs of yoga. I noticed you're giving this talk here, and I'd love for you to explain, you know, through your lens about the 8 limbs of yoga and why it's important to look at yoga holistically through the 8 limbs.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. In my first foundation diploma in yoga with Tara Fraser of Yoga Junction in I think 2006, we learnt the 8 limbs of yoga. We learnt them, we covered them, and I thought, oh yeah, that's interesting, and then immediately forgot about it because that wasn't really what I was there for. I was there to get my hamstrings looser. But then at some point between then and now, I realized, hang on a minute, I really want to learn these. And so I started chanting them before my practice. So I'd remember them. And really, once I'd remembered them, Yama, Niyama, and all of the yamas and all of the niyamas, yeah, I really felt like I benefited from having that knowledge in me. And the way I describe it in the talk is, if you had a puppy and the puppy was running around your house, doing its toilet everywhere, biting everyone who came, would you then just allow that puppy to grow up without training and become big and strong and let it out in the world? Obviously not. And for me, asana has become the same thing, you know, some exposure to ashtangis and seeing the power that asana practice brings. Well, if you have poor habits and poor psychological structures and you're not being a good person, well, you're being not a good person in a more strong, energized way in many cases. And so it's really Yama and Niyama that provide this amazing blueprint and advice for you even before you start doing asana.
Right.
But certainly certainly simultaneously with the asana practice should be some kind of attention to what you're doing. And the other way, the analogy that I like to use when I give this talk to people is, okay, asana is this amazing album, and when I listened to the asana album, I was so blown away and it's brought such joy into my life. I thought, okay, what other albums have the band made? And I want to look at the back catalogue. Yeah, what is the back catalogue? Well, really pre-asana, we've got Yama and Niyama as two other amazing bodies of work. And so I started wanting to listen to these albums. And so you listen to Yama, and it's the people that brought us yoga, you know, the rishis or Patanjali, whether Patanjali is one man or many sages, many teachers. They've said, pay attention to the following things. We have Yama, which is things we really recommend you don't do. And we have Niyama, which is things we recommend you cultivate and grow in the garden of your life. And if you want to achieve a state of yoga, one thing I say frequently in my classes is there's no such thing as yoga. There's only things you can do to bring a state of yoga. If you want to achieve this state of being together in all that you are, pay attention to the following things. And the bulk of these talks I give on the 8 limbs, because of my practice, tend to be more about Yama and Niyama. And then by that time, we've really discussed those at length. Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dana, Dhyana, Samadhi, it's never that much time for it. And I can't say that I've got such a strong experienced practice in the later limbs, and certainly my goal is not to merge with cosmic bliss in Samadhi. It's more of the householder's path to have the happiest and most amazing life now that I can.
Well, let's unpack the yamas and the niyamas for people who might be listening, who are like, what in the world are we talking about right now? What's a yama? What's a niyama? Like, you know, aside from things to do and things to not do, let's unpack it for people.
Okay, well, the first thing to unpack is the phrase Ashtanga Yoga. Yeah, Ashtanga Yoga is not Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga necessarily, with the primary series, Mysore style, and various spin-offs from that. That's the very, you know, muscle building, athletic, core strengthening yoga, asanas. Ashtanga means 8 limbs. Ashta, 8, anga, limbs, basically. And so the third of those limbs is asana, yoga postures that the world, when they're coming into yoga, think of as yoga.
Right, the physical postures.
The physical postures, whereas, you know, that's not entirely accurate. It's a part of it, and really it's asana exists to make your body quiet for the limbs that are after that to come, the meditation, the concentration. So in these steps, in these limbs, the first limb is Yama. And the way I translate this word, or the way that I understand it, is constraints on your conduct. And the way I remembered them is there are 3 that begin with A. So first I memorized the 3 that begin with A. So they are ahimsa, aparigraha, and asteya. And then you have 2 more, brahmacharya and satya. So if we start with ahimsa, this is probably the concept that most people come across in Religious Studies 101 within Hinduism, and it's the concept of non-violence. What is the concept of non-violence? I mean, how do we not get dogmatic when we say what non-violence is? This is the issue. It's what I find myself doing is not trying to dictate to everyone what non-violence means, but the concept of the band that brought us asana, which made me feel so calm and good. They said, pay attention to the principle of non-violence, don't be violent. And I try to imagine what that means to me and try to bring people in what that means to them. So the first classic one that we talk about is diet. Do you have to be a vegetarian to be practicing ahimsa, non-violence? What do you think?
Well, ahimsa is a foundational principle of my Conscious Eating 101 teaching that I do. In my view, I don't want to go with have to and should. You know, I don't like to hang out in those realms. It's more like this is what's recommended. Ahimsa for me is non-violence. It's doing the least harm. You know, doing no harm, doing the least harm possible. And in my view, if we are consuming animals in pretty much in any way, we are creating some suffering and some harm. So it's my perspective that for those of us on the yogic path, with ahimsa as a foundational principle of our lives, if we want to be on the true yogic path, the best choice is to avoid eating animals and causing harm. Even dairy. I mean, certainly in the West, dairy is, the dairy industry is fraught with suffering and harm and violence.
Yeah.
In the U.S. we kill 17 million chickens a minute for food. That's violent. So I could talk for hours on just that one, but that's my basic nutshell answer.
So the way I'll describe this in the context of how I like to transmit it is, you have taken this principle of non-violence and filtered it through the relevant parts of your life and come up with a way that you'll apply the principle. As well, you're not going to say should, you're not going to say have to, because we've come from monotheistic places where we were told for centuries should, have to, this way. And the beautiful thing about yoga and all of the teachers that I had is that it was also non-dogmatic and amazing, and I treasure that aspect of it. So I'd never sit there in front of a group of students and say, you have to be vegetarian. But what I would say is, the yoga band have given some strong advice to pay attention to the principle of non-violence and what that means to you. Whether that means beautifully rearing some pigs, caring them, loving them, and with consciousness and reverence, slaughtering them, butchering them, and eating them with gratitude and ceremony. Who am I to say what that is for an individual and their filter and their heart? So this is the way that it has to be for me to remain non-dogmatic. I come from a Jewish family. There's a lot of dogma thrust on me as a child. I don't have any time for it, not 1 second.
Yeah. Well, with the food thing and ahimsa, there's so many dimensions to just that one point right there. I mean, because as I teach it, it's conscious eating, self-love, animal love, and planet love. So it's beyond the cruelty or the harm that we may be causing the animal. It's also towards ourselves and towards the planet. So sometimes, ahimsa, first and foremost should be applied towards yourself, right? It's just like in the plane, put the oxygen mask on yourself before someone else. So if a time comes when it's like medically necessary, for you to balance yourself and you need to have some animal product, occasionally on a short-term basis to do that, that's something that I'm trying to come from the perspective where I'm not fanatical about it. It's a principle, right? That it's like an aspiration. It's a guidepost, ahimsa. Like, as much as possible, may our food choices not harm ourselves, certainly the animals, and then the planet, because the environmental impact of our food choices is so massive. But I think we're veering off topic a bit. I could talk about this stuff all day long, but I want to go deeper into the yamas and the niyamas. So ahimsa is the first. Yeah. And
so the listener could really be thinking, what does non-violence mean to me in the other ways? It's not just food, it's of thought, it's of deed, it's of what things we passively support with our spending and the roots. Is it, even voting for political parties or supporting political structures with our energy almost that are violent and things like this. So we can definitely draw a line there, but it's the headline is, there's a principle that we're recommending, the yoga band recommend for you to be in a state of yoga, and that's the principle of non-violence, however that means to the listener's life. Okay, next, aparigraha. Aparigraha, the principle of non-grasping and non-reaching. So, the obvious one is materialism and the need for the next newest iPhone or BMW or whatever. It's definitely not saying don't want to better your conditions, but it's saying watch it, isn't it? It's saying there's an element, there's a place where it's healthy and can you can have a life that is in harmony and unified, and there's a place where this becomes unhealthy. And I'm sure most people listening to this podcast will be able to differentiate in their own scale people that they know in their life who have got an unhealthy reachingness with material things. The other thing is that I apply is people. For me, partners, meeting someone where you meet a person and there's an attraction there, you know, to what extent are you really reaching for them? At what point is it healthy or unhealthy? We're not saying what that point is. We're saying the people that brought us yoga, consider reachingness and graspingness and what that means to you, to not be too much.
Yeah. Okay. What's the next one?
The next one, Asteya, the principle of not stealing. Now, there's obviously the very gross aspect of that. Don't take things that aren't yours.
Right.
But then you've got more subtle applications that we can easily think about. Don't take credit for things that you shouldn't take credit for. So even in the yoga world, you know, my teaching is just a collection, so much of the things I say, a collection of things that all of my amazing teachers say. So a lot of the time I find myself really wanting to credit them.
Yeah.
And when I don't do that, when I'm just in the flow more, I feel, oh, okay, yeah, so I said this from Peter, this from Karen Long, this from Randall, this from this one, and something sits wrong that I haven't transmitted that credit. So I do whenever I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you say, you know, the other more subtle aspects. I mean, there's so many ways that we are stealing and taking something that's not ours. Labor
of the world, of the developing world, to have all of the products that we have and throw away, and all of these things, you know, really to have that real amazing yoga, state of yoga, we really have to be considering the energy, the prana,
right,
the life force of everything we touch. But you know, do I know? Am I super conscious? No, I consider myself to be semi-conscious.
Semi-conscious.
This is a bit of a semi-conscious community.
Well, another aspect of stealing that I always think about when this one comes up is how we steal other people's time. You know, so if we're just talking someone's ear off with our own story.
Oh my God. And we all know people like
stealing,
this.
Right?
Yes, and to not be considerate. So when you're in that person, you meet that person, when you know just to say hello is a 15-minute thing. Yeah, when you're like on the way somewhere, so you just end up blanking because that person hasn't got that button or that gauge that realizes that they're kind of stealing your time.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, you don't seem together. If you're that person, to me, you're like, you don't seem together. You don't. I don't feel that you're in a state of yoga, and it's hard.
Yeah, and I think this is such a valuable conversation for people because, you know, reminders about ways to be, and helping us be more mindful and aware. Like, you know, people may not even think about these things at all, but then once you hear this conversation, it's like next time you're in a conversation with someone, you might be more aware of, are you stealing their time, or, you know, even being late for appointments and things like that. That's another example, right, of this stealing.
Yeah, and you add it up. If you're late for a meeting, if you're late for a group appointment, well, and 10 people have been waiting 6 minutes for you, well, that's 60 minutes.
Yeah, so this is yoga as a lifestyle, as a path to become more mindful in every aspect of your life.
To shine the light of your awareness on these pointings. The lovely Muji Sangha that I just had my first real exposure to in Rishikesh. They talk about Muji's pointings, the pointings back to the self. Well, these are the pointings from Patanjali, from the Yoga Sutra.
So what's the next one?
Next one I'd like to talk about is brahmacharya. It's a biggie, you know, in the group environment. You can imagine we talk about no sexual misconduct and everyone's ears prick up.
Right.
And again, it's not about saying what sexual misconduct is or isn't. It's about saying the ones that brought us asana, that felt so good, that feel so good, that helped us so much, are saying, if you really want to achieve this state of yoga, this state of togetherness, pay very close attention to your sexual energy and its use. If you are paying attention and consciously are going and having whatever sexual activity you want, and it's really, you're really sure on the inside in your heart that it's making you feel good, we're not here to judge. But there's your own personal line. So my own personal line is, you know, I don't mind going out and having a few drinks and hooking up every now and then. It's nice, it's kind of fun, it's been a fun aspect of my life in history. I don't do it very much, but I'm not going to judge anyone for doing it. And if I were to go out, have a couple of drinks and meet somebody, it's awesome, great. But if I start doing that all the time and I start thinking about that rather than the other elements of my life, and I start to get low energy because I'm drinking too much just because I want to feel good to meet people because of insecurities, then I feel like there's something wrong. If, you know, pornography is another one. We've got lots of things we could say about pornography, but who is able to say hands down it's bad for someone to do it? That's not what we're here for. We're only here to shine the light of awareness using this lineage that we trust. And so this is the important point. And we spoke about this briefly at dinner before the interview, before the conversation that we were recording. I don't trust most structures and most lineages of old things or new things that have come into my life. I was born in England, and my mum told me the story of how the nurses advised her not to use breast milk with her children. And that's a society that developed in that way without the legislation being passed from the governments that stopped that. Poisoned food is completely normal, and you're kind of weird if you insist on organic food that hasn't been poisoned in this country. So this society, it's kind of, wow, I don't trust it. There's so many things I don't trust. Whereas through the yoga world that I've been exposed to, both the teachers on a human level and the teachings that I've read, I haven't been given anything not to trust. I haven't had anything that's ringing alarm bells in my body. So I am able to trust that the yoga band, in their back catalogue, they have the Yama. They're saying there's certain things you should not do. Don't misuse your sexual energy. We're not telling you what that means. We're saying think about what that means. You decide what that means.
Be mindful and aware.
And it's a question of trust. I really trust this lineage of yoga now, and it's, you know, been 15 years. Obviously, like I'm a baby. I mean, I saw an interview with Patabi Joyce. How long you have been doing the yoga? And the guy says a year, nothing. 5 years, nothing. 10 years, nothing. 20 years, something. And you know, I'm still a baby, but I'm just paying attention now. I'm paying attention. And
that's yoga. That's beautiful. It's awareness and mindfulness. Beautiful.
So the last one on the yamas, on the things to be careful of, is Satya, principle of not lying. The thing that rings alarm bells is sometimes the principle of not lying can come at odds with the principle of non-violence. Does my bum look big in this? No. Do you like my hair? Yes. But in general, not lying and finding a way to phrase the truth positively almost, or not misrepresenting yourself for personal gain in some context when you could, not exaggerating. I'm a bit of an exaggerator sometimes, I have to admit.
Well, it's good self-awareness.
Yeah. My friends at home know me as that I always sound like I know what I'm talking about, even. And when you know me for long enough, that they sort of realise when I don't.
Well, you know about this stuff, so this is great. We're educating people that don't know anything about the 8 limbs. So let's carry on with that. So what's next? So we did the yamas.
So it's the yamas. So, you know, in summation of the yamas, the yoga world, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra has a list of things that if you want to achieve a state of yoga, they really recommend you not to do. And those are the yamas: ahimsa, aparigraha, asteya, brahmacharya, and satya. So then we move on to the niyamas, things to practice, practice being them. And the way I remember these is that there's 3 that begin with S. Yeah, so the 3 that begin with S are santosha, saucha, and svadhyaya. Then you have ishvana pranidhara and tapas. So let's start at the beginning. Santosha is one of my favorites. Just the word is just a lovely word, santosha. And it kind of means, it stands for contentment. So practice the feeling of contentment. How do you do that? Well, it's actually thinking of things that you're grateful for, thinking of things that are right about your life rather than wrong. And then this concept of neuroplasticity comes in, the neural pathways in the brain. Someone that's practicing moaning and complaining, their pathways for the moaning and complaining are more well trod, and that seems to come out. Someone that's practicing being grateful, those pathways in the brain of contentment and gratitude are more well practiced, and so that's what comes out in the situation where you're not practicing. So it's a valuable practice. And if there is a practice in the world that I do that is the most valuable, it's being grateful. And then it kind of snowballs and you just end up feeling grateful without having to try about so many things. And it seems to have been more and more as the years within a firm yoga practice tick by, that I seem to be more and more grateful for a more and more simple life.
Beautiful. I see that.
Yeah, you see that with your life as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. The simpler, I mean, even on this journey I've been on now, traveling for 2 months, it's like I've been living in some really simple, basic, conditions, much simpler than the home I have at home, the life I have at home, but so content and just so happy, just grateful for every breath, for every day, for every opportunity, even when things aren't flowing exactly what I might consider my way, because there are ups and downs every day. But just in general, I could say the same that you just said. I mean, I'm becoming more and more content in my life with less and less, and this is I think one of the gifts of the yogic path.
It's interesting, but I think it's worth saying that it's practicing the gratefulness when you're not feeling good in life that is probably the most powerful. It's all very easy with our blessed lives, from our blessed foundations, that we have these nice lives that we're happy with. It's all very well to say, but it's the practice is when the chips are down, I reckon, of santosha, of contentment. Cultivate it in the garden of the life.
Yeah, beautiful.
The next one is a lovely one to think about, is saucha, purity and hygiene. Covers massive, and we go back into food very easily. Put clean things into your body rather than dirty. So the processed food, in my life, in my filter, it's talks. I think about processed food rather than whole food is less clean. The organic thing comes up again. But you know what? The most powerful form of yoga that I do, house yoga. When my house is clean and tidy, and the drawers are emptied and the lint cleared out and the things put with and I go out into the community, the outer world, and I am untouchable.
Cute.
Yeah,
I like that.
If I have a few days where I'm leaving my clothes on the floor, bed unmade, a little bit grime everywhere, a little bit of a mess, have to look for things, that feeds very fast into my life. So house yoga for me is part of saucha, the practice of being clean and hygiene.
Nice.
One lovely teacher I had insisted that we came to practice having showered, even though we were doing Mysore style, very sweaty practice. No, he was like, we're doing prayer, we're doing something holy, you come clean, and it's part of saucha, one of these things to cultivate. We're not saying everyone has to do that, we're saying filter it. What's your gauge? What's your opinion of how clean you need to keep your body. And your home. How does it make you feel to be more clean or less clean?
Yeah.
How does it affect the state of yoga that you can feel in your life, the state of union and togetherness that you can feel in your life?
Yeah, that's powerful. Okay, Saucha, that's a great explanation of that. Thank you. What's next?
Svadhyaya, self-study. So self-study, it's saying if you want to be in a state of yoga, we recommend that you practice self-study in your life. Now, what does this mean to me? It means to me two things. One, create the space in my life to assess my conduct. And that means being quiet, generally by myself, or sometimes with a partner, to be talking about, you know, what their experience of me or what their mirroring of me is, to be really looking and conscious of how we are and how we affect others. And that needs space. That needs purpose and space. It needs it's a practice. Practice looking at oneself. And the other thing is to be studying something, to be studying by yourself, to be progressing. Like we were just talking about Daisy Kay, and how every time she comes back here for the next season, she's progressed into another amazing evolution of another healing modality to add to all of the others. And that's, for me, self-study off her own back. She's just making sure she's learning and continuing the education. And all of these things helping come into this state of union.
Yeah. This is yoga.
Yeah. So the next one is Ishvana Pranidhara. Surrender to the will of God. Surrender to the, we'll use the G word. Wow, I don't usually do that. So problematic these days. Surrender to the will of the universe. Get out the way of your unique gift. Everyone has things they know they're good at. And it's the practice of this, I guess, is to find the way the things that you're good at mesh with what's needed in the world. And it's a practice. Or to read the signs of the world. You know, I'm meant to be going in this direction and not that direction. Don't swim upstream all the time. Go with the Tao, go with the flow a little bit in some way.
It's like the law of least resistance.
Sometimes, but you know, it's a little bit, it does ring alarm bells just saying it like that, because sometimes you have to work bloody hard and be tenacious and persistent. And you know that lovely story about the mouse running up the lighthouse, and it's the deaf one that won because he was the only one that didn't hear people telling him that he wasn't going to make it. He was the only one that got to the top. So it's not always the path of least resistance. So that's why it morphs in me to be more like, what's the will? Listen. Read the signs. What's the will of the universe? What do you need to be doing?
More active than passive.
Yeah, it's really positive. What is it that you need to be doing to achieve this grand design? Because, you know, I love the concept of we are having a human experience. Yeah, we're a part of something, part of source, having an experience as a human for certain reasons, and to offer something, or maybe to learn something, to work out karmas, they might say in yoga world also. And it's about feeling that and accepting that, rather than having the structures placed upon you by society and dreams placed upon you by things that we don't trust. You know, the Pink Floyd lyric, what did you dream? It's alright, we told you what to dream. Rings really true here. It's like, yeah, everyone's dreaming what they've been told to dream. So many people, but I think certainly in our circles, people are beginning to wake up and find their unique places. And this is this niyama, Ishvara Pranidhana. Sounds a bit like abracadabra, doesn't it?
It does a bit.
I always get the R and the N mixed up as well in my dyslexic brain. I'm sorry for that if I did.
No, it's perfect. Yeah, so it's surrendering to the will of Source,
Yes, surrender. Resistance is futile.
Yeah.
And then the last niyama is tapas. And it almost means the heating of a thing. So if you have a desire, you have to heat it. If I want to be an amazing yoga teacher, I have to keep working and practicing and developing my practice and doing. If you want to learn a language, you have to actually sit down and learn the language rather than just say I want to learn the language. It's almost like walking the walk as well as talking the talk is the tapas, is the heating element. And it's saying without doing that, the yoga band is saying, oh, you might struggle with this state of yoga if you're just talking the talk and not doing the things, the actions necessary in order to walk towards what you're looking to walk towards. And then having this practice of doing in the life is important.
So the tapas is an action?
I mean, it's how I understand it, but of course in yoga as well there's so much emphasis on sitting and being, but that's how I have come to understand tapas. And I'm not the most learned scholar, I'm not the most well-read person in the world. It's just, you know, I've been exposed to various books and various ideas and have meditated on it and thought about it, and this is what it means to me.
Yeah, perfect. So that's the yamas and the niyamas.
Yeah.
So let's sum up the rest.
Okay, so just to sum up what's happened, yeah, I loved the album Asana from the yoga band. I loved it so much. I started listening to their back catalogue, Yama, Niyama, both amazing album, 5 amazing tracks on each album.
Yeah.
All really helping me, and now I understand Yama and Niyama. I enjoy Asana even more.
Right.
Yeah, it's incredible. So what's after Asana? What other material of this band released? Well, pranayama is the 4th step. Prana, life force, ayama, control of. We do this through breath control, breath exercises. This involves sitting still. Generally, you can bring pranayama into asana, and I love to do that in my classes, but primarily it's sitting still. And I'm just a baby. I started teaching a workshop here on it, and I realized, wow, my pranayama practice is not advanced enough for long enough to really be understanding and transmitting this, and so I stopped. I'll do basic pranayamas a little bit within the classes, but
yeah,
I've
vast.
I've done so many more thousands of hours of yoga asana than I have pranayama, and
Yeah, pranayama is just a huge ocean of, I mean, so many practices, and
so many
deep,
practices,
and with so many details within each one.
But I love the way that Randall O'Leary of Jungle Yoga describes all of these yogic practices as ways of managing energy. Yeah, and pranayama is an amazing way of managing energy through Ida and Pingala, the 2 kind of secondary nadis, energy rivers, pranic rivers. The Pingala is in the right nostril and represents solar, masculine, active energy, and Ida in the left nostril representing feminine, lunar energy. And in various interplays with these 2 concepts through the left and the right nostril, and breathing through the left and the right, increasing more inhalation or increasing more exhalation, you can manage your energy in certain ways.
Yep.
And this is the fundamentals of the pranayama practice, the concept of prana, of energy, of life force, and pranamaya kosha, the energetic sheath of the 5 sheaths of the body.
Right.
And so this is what pranayama is referring to, the effect on your prana of various practices, almost always involving breath or the retention of breath.
Yeah. We need to do a whole show just on prana.
Yeah.
Pranayama, yeah. So that's the 4th limb.
Then pratyahara, the removal of the 5 senses. The yoga band saying, if you want to achieve a state of yoga, you have to recognize we're living in a sensory world. And in order to really understand source, you have to withdraw from that sensory world, fasting, silence, blindfolds, withholding of physical contact. Yeah? Not sure how to stop smelling, but holding the breath, I guess, is part of that. And in withdrawing of these senses, there is a touch into something beyond sensory experience. There's dark retreat on this island, and a few people who I really respect have really been raving about dark retreats recently. Have you come across them?
No.
Where it's meant to activate the pituitary gland or something like this and really release amazing chemicals into the body. And this is I guess a manifestation, an example of the removal of senses.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What it does. Do you ever practice blindfolded?
No, but when I practice personally, I tend to close my eyes a lot. Yeah.
There's a beautiful platform on Wainam, the next beach overlooking the ocean, and some of my most amazing practices have been blindfolded on that platform. And I thoroughly recommend to anyone who's beginning to develop their own personal practice to put a scarf around their eyes and to practice without seeing.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
And the next ones, really, I can pay lip service to them, but I really have to be honest and say I'm not an advanced practitioner. I'm not even an intermediate practitioner of dana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, cosmic bliss. What can I say about them that people can't read better in B.K. Iyengar, Light on the Yoga Sutras, or any of these books?
Yeah, there are plenty of resources for people to go deeper, but what I appreciate about this is just laying it out for people, just the outline of it. Like, these are things like, if you want to consider yourself a yogi, or you feel drawn to the yogic path, this is yoga. There's way more to it than the third limb, than the asana.
And the trouble is, there's people training teachers who don't even know these, haven't really assimilated any of them into their practice, and they're within the business of yoga training teachers because people want to give them money and they've got a good Instagram account, and this for me is a tragedy. Now, and I love the fact that the teachers that I've had are so ingrained in these practices and have them as second nature. I'm so proud that I've been taught by these people that realized it was important, and in order to do them justice, it has to become important to me. And in my practice, I think. Yeah, well, I appreciate you giving the talk on the 8 limbs and educating people about this. This is, as I've mentioned to you, one of my goals with the show is to help people deepen their understanding of what true yoga is, the holistic scope of the philosophy of yoga, and encourage people as much as I can to follow the yogic path, because I do see it as an incredible solution to personal happiness, to planetary health. I mean, if we could all practice, even just a couple of the limbs of yoga, if every person could practice even just a couple of them, it could totally transform the world. I could not agree more. It's the blueprint that I've found in my life that is the one that resonates with me the most. Yeah, I mean, once you get on the path, and it's like, I like to say that yoga is the gateway drug to higher consciousness. It's like you start, often people come to the practice, as a fitness routine, and I did. Yeah, I mean, most people probably do. In the West, in India, it's not like that. It's through bhakti, it's through devotion, kirtan, singing, prayer. Yeah, but coming from the West, most people come to yoga for, they have a physical ailment, or they're trying to reduce stress, or they're trying to get in shape, right? I mean, it's kind of done as a stress relief technique, or, a fitness routine. And it's like, yoga activates more in you than that. You come for what you think you need, and you get what, you come for what you want, and you end up getting what you really need through yoga. And I just always want to encourage people to really show up with an open heart and an open mind, and just be open to,
all of the limbs and all of the practices that are coming. And, it can be intimidating when people are practicing things that you don't understand. But I always like to encourage people as well to find teachers that they just resonate with energetically. And from there, the practice will automatically unfold and expand in a positive and natural way. But if you show up at some studio and try a class and you don't enjoy it at all and say, oh, I tried yoga, it didn't work for me, that's not the end of the story. That's just okay, that's great, you showed up, give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself some credit for showing up. You are having a call to yoga, try again. Go to a different studio or try a different class, or look online for some videos and just find where it resonates with you and keep showing up to it, because the practice will give you so much. So many gifts from yoga.
Aho.
Well, thank you, Jonny, for your time and for helping us unpack the 8 limbs of yoga. I think this is an important conversation for people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for asking me. I enjoy being here with you.
Yay. And I'm going to have to come to another one of your yoga classes and have some more giggles and some more opening. And yeah, I really enjoyed your class the other day. I'm going to have to get in for another one. So thank you for showing up and holding the space here at the sanctuary and bringing yoga to the people. And I love too that we have in common, we talked about dinner, is that we both really enjoy new yoga students, right? People who have never done yoga before.
First timers. Wow, what a blessing.
Yeah.
Purely because of this guy, the Baron, whose name was Greg, and I'd love to somehow for him to hear this and to understand what he did to my life by being so nice and so transmitting in such an accessible way. And this is, when I get the chance to do that, it's like, that is the biggest blessing.
Yeah, turning people onto this practice and this lifestyle. And I really like to think of yoga as a tool. Yoga is like a life skill. It's a tool. I mean, if we have our toolbox that helps us get through life, like, I don't know where my life would be if it weren't for yoga. I mean, it's definitely something that keeps me sane and, keeps me in a state of, contentment and even happiness. Even when my life doesn't look the way I want it to, I can come around to gratitude. And I have to attribute that to the yogic path.
Also with me the same.
Yeah. Beautiful. Love connecting with you, Jonny. Thank you again. Namaste.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for answering the call to be here today. I'm so glad you're part of our tribe of activated Rainbow Warriors. If you found the show in any way empowering or inspiring, I would be so grateful if you would share the show on social media or with friends and family that you think would benefit from these conversations. And also, rate and review the show in iTunes. This is really the very best way to help support the show and help us get noticed by others who are looking for the sort of content that we're sharing. Now notice there are no outside ads playing here. That's because the show is supported by you, the listener. You can become a patron of the show with a small monthly donation by checking out the perks on our Patreon page at patreon.com/visionary lifestyle and signing up there. There's also a one-time donation button on the podcast page of the website if that suits you better. And just so you know, your donations help to cover the necessary out-of-pocket monthly expenses to produce the show and will also help us grow so we can inspire and educate even more people. And hey tribe, I'd love to hear from you. Visit me at visionary-lifestyle.com and please tell me your comments and questions. I really look forward to connecting with you. I love you. Namaste.